Again.
Hey, Eric, good to see you again.
Good to see you. We have a good topic today, but at some future date, I just thought I'd open by saying we need to talk about what it means to have workplace flexibility. You might notice I just got back from a bike ride. I took the morning off. It's going to rain this afternoon, so I took the morning off. Took a bike ride. Now I got stuff to do late into the evening tonight. But
Hold on. Excuse
that's
me.
true. That's true flexibility, and I think a lot of people don't feel like they could do something like that.
You mean you didn't clock in at 8 a.m.? What's wrong with you? You clearly aren't working hard enough.
I didn't. I misplaced my punch card. Okay, this is a conversation for a later date.
I think we're going to get into it a little bit with the topic.
Okay, so my question to you, this is a question to you, because this is more in your expertise. But here's the setup. I'm curious why we still see so many organizations having sales departments. And I very specifically mean by that, like, there's a bunch of salespeople that report to a manager that reports to a VP or something like that, and they're in their own little bubble within the organization, and they have their own processes and their own function and their own organization and their own culture, and their own everything. And juxtaposed to that, for the past decade, we've been making we've been making teams more and more cross-functional. We've been taking product teams and putting a product owner, product manager, software engineer, tester, DevOps person, architect, and sometimes we see some non-product development positions. Once in a while, we see a marketing associate join the team, but on teams that have had legal associates join the team when we're doing heavy compliance things. But I've almost never seen an organization that has a salesperson kind of with their first affinity towards the product team, instead of the salesperson having their affinity towards the sales department. So, Jeff, why do we have sales departments?
There is a lot of legitimately good reason for sales departments. And let's take off the easy one first. For companies that are really sales and marketing companies selling other people's goods. They're not developing their own goods. They're distributors in reality, or they're a marketing. They have drop shipping. They're doing stuff like that. The sales and marketing departments that are isolated kind of make sense because you don't need a whole lot of, you need some logistical people and things like that, operational people. There's some service-based companies where the person selling is the one that really is the face of the organization until affinity, and what they're selling, service-wise, doesn't change based on what you sell. Think of financial advisors, so to speak.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like if your product is never going to change again,
or if it's managed outside of your company in reality.
Okay, sure.
Where the relationship is what you're selling, and access to products is not a real the access to product or service isn't the differentiator. You really have to come up with a differentiation in the marketing and sales process.
Okay, I can see that.
So those are real good reasons to have sales.
Yeah, that'd be a good reason to have a sales department, like a dedicated sales department.
Yeah, and that's because sales and marketing are leading the charge for that company's growth.
Okay, great.
And it's funny, in those cases, they're expecting the salesperson to become an expert. On the product and service. You're leading the way. You're sitting down, and financial advisors sit down and do your planning. Insurance agents and brokers sit down and do your planning, and the best ones are great at selling, but they're really great at designing those structures, if you will.
Yeah. I can even see it like if you're in the situation where you have a warehouse full of products to sell, and those products are already done and complete and they're in the warehouse. Then maybe you have a dedicated sales department that's tasked with moving that product.
Yeah, and let's not just badmouth all sales departments, because you're a software as a service company, you're launching. You may want a few people that are experts in sales and report into a VP of sales who's doing the marketing and sales strategy. And where those departments are key is, this is who we're reaching out to, this is the specific niche, this is how we're getting in front of them. And they bring back things like market awareness. They bring back things like, hey, this is the couple features that are missing. And their skill set is one of opening the door, creating quick value through knowledge of industry, knowledge of market, knowledge of problems. They differentiate to get that door opened, And then they're really good at bringing feedback to your development team, to your engineering team that says, this is how we can improve our product or service to create a bigger, better differentiation.
Okay, let me press you on that one, because I think what I heard you say is salespeople could be good product managers.
So me and you have had this fight before. And
I know.
I think product management and in software and product-led companies, if you will. And that strategy, your product managers need to be out there doing the work. But now let's talk about that workflow. And this is where I think you and I are going to agree, and the titles and the division names are a relic of the past. And that's what we're going to get to here in a second, I think. And we talk about that workflow. If you talk about the first step in the product-led companies, creating awareness. And it's great if you have a huge marketing budget and you can do broad campaigns and buy all of that. Great, do it. Mm-hmm. But if you don't, you want the people that can open the doors, that can go networking, that can shake hands and create interest really quickly. And I don't necessarily want my product manager spending time on that. Where we don't want to teach the product manager how to knock down doors. We don't want to teach them how to get past the gatekeepers. We don't want to teach them all of those things. That's a specialized skill set. And it
takes a lot of time to be clear. Like just getting in the door takes an incredible amount of time.
Yeah, and cost. And there's a whole lot of things going into it that's a specialized skill. And on the marketing side, creating brand awareness campaigns, managing campaigns, understanding which platform to use, what's your distribution, which language applies to which market, all of those things. Which trade shows should we be at? Which is our target market at those trade shows? What's the branding we need? All of that, and this is where I think we're going to get to here. So I'm gonna do a spoiler, but the idea is that all of those things have to work in conjunction. And whether it reports to sales, whether it reports to marketing, whether it reports to chief revenue officer, or these are people that the product manager, report directly to a product manager. I could care less. But the more of the important issue is that this is a cross-functional team that says, hey, we're going to market with this idea. This is the support I need to be able to take that idea to market. Here's the test and here's the feedback.
Yeah, I think you and I agree upon that philosophy. The trouble comes in where in most organizations, it's not as easy as saying, we don't care who you report to. We want you to be part of a cross-functional team. Because who you report to actually carries a heck of a lot of weight in most traditional organizations.
And so, there you said it though, traditional. So you asked me why these departments exist the way they do, and it's because it's the way it's always been done. And I don't know that anyone with an agile mindset, if you're building something from scratch and you don't have ties to that, builds what's always been done. It really doesn't serve anyone.
Yeah. Okay, so what does the future look like then? Most of us and most companies in some way, shape, or form. Sorry about that whining dog there. Most companies in some shape or form are developing products that aren't complete. They're not sitting in a warehouse ready to be sold. That it does require exactly what you talked about. We need to get access to customers and potential customers. We need to have a product focus. We need to be concerned about whether or not we're even building the right thing. So in companies like that, how should we organize salespeople, if not in a dedicated sales department? What does a modern, non-traditional company look like?
Let's even remove the discussion and for this first part, let's remove the discussion of departments.
Okay.
And what I look at is let's create the value stream map. Let's talk about how we're doing a test that says this is the best way to open the door. This is the best way to get the feedback, right? You design that test and then they get to go sit with the product teams on your sprints and say, this is what we need to be able to do that. And it doesn't always need to be a completed product. We need to be able to show this. We need to be able to show this architecture. We need to be able to show this security function. We just need to be able to show the map. Like, have a clean description and a clean decision on what the first iteration of this test looks like and what's necessary.
Cool. Now, can I try to translate that to agile speak?
Of course.
So the team, the product team, and I guess for now we're leaving off where the salesperson lives. But the product team could do something like define a hypothesis and design an experiment to test that hypothesis. And if that experiment is something that a salesperson could do solo, you could actually give the execution of that experiment to the salesperson. And
Absolutely.
these types of experiments would be like on the order of conversations, right? We're not asking the salesperson to do a rapid clickable prototype right in front of the customer or something like that. But we could design an experiment that says, hey, look, we need to talk to 50 prospects, and we'll know that we're on the right path if at least 20 of them get to some conclusion during this conversation.
Yeah, and here's how I think I frame that, and I'll give you a real life example we're working through right now. We have a client of mine is going through a sales sprint. You would recognize this, the sales sprints, and they wanted to test a new offer. Now, they didn't want to spend a lot of time creating that product. They didn't want to spend a lot of time in the back scene, so they created the smallest version of what was necessary. And the smallest version was a description and an outline of what was going to happen, and then a waitlist button. And they ran a small marketing campaign using LinkedIn ads. I think the total cost was $575.
Breaking the bank.
Yeah, and the goal was to get 100 clicks to that page from that LinkedIn campaign, and then see how many of them, quote unquote, join the wait list. On the side of it, they said, hey, salespeople, and they have 3 individual reps that are responsible for this test. Go talk to 25 of your current prospects and go talk to 25 of your current accounts. Show them this page and see if they will click the join the wait list. And basically the test was, now we have, and I forgot the total number here, I think it was like 325 people that are going to view this. How many said click to join the wait list?
Nice.
And it was just a very simple idea, a very fast forward way to put this. They put a time limit of 2 weeks on it. And now in 2 weeks, they understand if they have something that hits a spot.
Yeah. So you and I very much agree that sounds like good product development. It sounds like good organization, and it doesn't matter who reports to whom if that's the way that the team's operate.
Yeah, and just I'm sitting in the chief revenue officer seat. I'm the interim chief revenue officer in this case. I sat down with the VP of product, and the VP of product was like, hey, look, here's the strategy for the next 12 months. This is what we have to get to. And him and I discussed basically what are the biggest assumptions we have and how are we going to validate those assumptions.
Okay.
And once we wrote those assumptions down, we're now running tests against those assumptions to validate that. And this was one of those small tests. 2 weeks, $575, and 3 people. And I know what everyone's going to push back is, you're saying it's $575. You're not including the time for marketing to create the LinkedIn ad. You're not including time for them to create the waitlist button and the landing page. You're right. I'm not, because that's literally built into the fixed cost of the company. We have that marketing department. We're choosing to aim them at this. That is not variable cost. There's a trade-off that we could be doing something else, but what's more important than getting feedback and testing branding?
Sure. The interesting thing here is it's very rare to see it. Let me see how do I phrase this? I think if I went and I asked 100 product teams, can they collaborate with the salesperson to help run experiments? Maybe 1 or 2 out of 100 would say yes, and most people would be like, no, they're not available for that kind of stuff. They're the salespeople. They're not involved in that kind of stuff ever. They don't want to be. That's not their job. People will get mad at us and say things like we're taking time away from revenue generation in order to do this other stuff. How do you respond to that kind of stuff?
So a couple things. One, I in most of these times I am the sales leader, so I get to make that decision. And when I talk to the salespeople, my pushback to them is, what we're trying to do is get the easiest product for you to sell, period, the end. What is the easiest product for you to sell? And that doesn't come from a salesperson's head. That doesn't come from the CEO's head. That comes from the market and closing the gap on whatever problem they have in the most efficient way possible, right? Mm-hmm. And so the closer that we can get these loops tied and the tighter we can make this, the more able the product manager and the product team is able to deliver on that. And if you tell me I have a product that's 1-to-1 to match a problem, I don't even need to do anything to generate revenue, right? I get my job is to get out of the way. And so and you and I have a lot of agreement on this. The closer these teams work together to serve the client's need, the better off the client is. Period. That's how you create raving fans. And do that over and over again. And guess what? Sales is easy.
Yeah. So if we do that over and over again, my gut feel, and this is definitely my kind of agile bias, I think my gut feel is if we do that over and over again, we get really good at working like this. The concept of a sales department vanishes in the same way that the concept of a coding department has vanished, right? We are moving towards focusing companies and their organization on the products that we deliver to customers. And we're forming teams around that product instead of around the functions that build the product. Is that track?
Yeah. Now there's a couple things we have to add on to that. You're a great product expert. You're a great product strategist. You're a great team leader for product. When we say this, the departments are going. Let's remove the titles and just talk about the things that have to get done, right? We have to create a great product and service. And part of that is how you're getting in front of customers and getting feedback, how we're getting market feedback and constantly iterating. Well, now you have to still develop a marketing strategy, a sales strategy. You have to develop the processes. You have to develop the sales enablement. You have to do all of these things. So I could, what departments that falls under, that's not a product owner, product manager, product-led specialist expertise.
Right.
And for them to learn that aspect of it, I think is not as valuable of a time, or is not the most pressing issue they should be working on.
Yeah, and we would never advocate for something like that. I think the thing that I've seen is as these departments go away, as we peel away the structure and the affinity that people have towards, I'm a salesperson, I report to the sales VP, or I'm a coder, I report to the coding VP. As we peel that stuff away, that doesn't mean that we're peeling away leadership or expertise or just seniority, right? Like there's a value in having an expert level salesperson the same way that there's a value in having an expert level quality engineer or coder or whatever, right? It's just that the structure and the reporting and the communication patterns that creates can be all but deleted in my mind. That those things can go away, because what we actually want is the people to communicate that are on the same product team, moving the product closer and closer towards the customer paying us money for it.
Yeah, and let's talk about, we refer to it as sprint sales. We can upscale it to the whole agile methodology to some extent. But if you think about this, what is the outcome of a product manager? What's that goal?
Yeah, optimizing the value of the product.
Yeah, and what's the goal of a salesperson? That, you're an outside sales rep.
Getting invited to the President's Club sales trip every year.
Oh, stop it!
I got to get one in on every one of these.
The goal of an outside sales rep is to make profitable deals over and over again, and do so to the optimized ability of the company. And those two things go hand in hand, because the product manager can't optimize the product for the clients, and the sales leader can't sell shit unless that's true. And so if we look at how that workflow happens, and that's something you and I completely agree on. Let's take small batch sprints. Let's come up with a goal or an outcome for that sprint. And let the team organized in the best possible way to do that. Now, the leadership team...
I would say that the product team is already doing that.
Oh, without a doubt.
Right. So like it makes a lot of sense that like maybe this is really just a holdover. It seems like it'd be very easy to take the salesperson and say, hey, work in the same cadence as the product team. And sometimes you'll be working really closely with the people on that product team and helping them run experiments or giving them feedback for conversations you've had with prospects. And sometimes you won't be working very close with that product team. You'll be working on the sales launch activities or sales enablement or sales engineering or whatever. And you'll be kind of disconnected, but we're going to put you on this team and allow you to work very, very closely with these folks so that there is no delay or handoff or miscommunication. but because you and the product team are disconnected. We're going to connect you at the hip.
And you know, I refer to the old style here and as train wreck management. And the reason I refer to it as train wreck management is the hierarchy was created, I want to say 1914. The organizational chart was created sometime way back to figure out who was at fault for a train wreck. That's why the org chart exists today. And one of the things that you and I just completely agree on, and is that, you know, 30 years ago, manufacturing went through an update and a change, maybe 40 years ago at this point, from old school laws of scale, manufacture volume, have a bunch of it go into obsolete, you know, become obsolete. And then hopefully we sell it for a discount to lean manufacturing, which was just in time. That's one part. And all of those things that were great. And software development and DevOps and all of those things caught up over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And sales is still operating on train wreck management. And the artifact of what you're discussing is now you have this product team who's doing 1-2 week sprints coming up with new things. Well, what happens is the product team sits on that, the stakeholders sit on that. That information gets fed up to the sales leader. The sales leader hears it and then feeds it back down to the sales team, right?
That sounds really efficient.
And by the way, now you just ended a sprint. All of these meetings follow up. It's a week later when the sales team actually hears about this stuff. Best case scenario. And we played a game of telephone as adults with people who are on their phones and stuff paying attention to the sprint release, right? I mean, that's what happens. So we're not taking advantage of the fact that the product team is agile because the sales team is not only a week behind, but they're a week behind and 50% off. And so I think what we're really discussing is tear down the silos. We as leaders come up with the targets, the direction. Here's the strategy we're putting in place. Here's the tactics we're going to use to implement that strategy. But let's put the sales leader and the product manager in the same room. Say, guys, our goal is to sell one of these in the next 2 weeks. And I use that as an example because that's a sprint we did recently with one of my clients.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting that you're saying this because this makes perfect sense. And then this is a whole different ball of worms, but maybe for next time we chat. What happens when the sales leader and the product leader have competing incentives? And, you know, you and I have been put in this position, and luckily because we talk, that's really it. Luckily because we talk about these things, we realized that there were competing incentives and we could work it out. But I think a lot of organizations they might talk, that they might be with us so far in the first 20 minutes of this conversation that they might be like, hey, look, this sounds great. We need to get our product teams and our sales teams tied closely together. We don't want to play the game of telephone. We don't want salespeople to be less informed than product people or vice versa. And yet they would say all of that. They'd put all of this in motion, and then they'd immediately go to an executive offsite and say the sales team is responsible for this quota, and the product team is responsible for delivering X number of features.
Well, they're dumb. I don't want to work with them anyway. But let's be real. The end answer here is you and I sit in the room. The board of directors says we need to make this much money. Our job is to say, okay, this is the milestones we can hit over the next month, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. Here's the strategy tactics we're going to use to do that. And then we go back to our team leaders and say, hey guys, this is what we need. And then we get the F out of the way. And they organize. And I kid you not, when we've put the sale, think about it, every time you and I have done it together, there's never been a downside to putting the sales leader, the sales managers, the outside sales guys right next to the product managers.
No downside.
And the quote unquote cost of that is some extra meetings. And in those meetings, you get way more efficient than a silly pipeline meeting that talks about what's not going to close in 30 days. And let the sales team hear all of the things that are missing in the product. So the sales manager goes, tells the sales leader what's missing in the product, who goes, tells it. And best case scenario, it's mistranslated to the product manager and 3 sprints late. As opposed to the sales leader saying, hey, look, here's the client. I'm bringing it right to the product manager because we want to close one deal in 2 weeks. Let's get it all in the same room. Let's work with that client directly.
That sounds great. We should work like that.
You and I do. I think everyone should. I'm passionate about this because sales is stuck in 1914.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, let's sum this up. What are the best reasons to have a dedicated sales department? Under what circumstances would that be a good strategic decision?
Marketing and sales is the lead of the company. Marketing and sales is selling an already set product or service that's generally out of your control, that's a fixed offering, into a hyper competitive market where they need to be the differentiators.
All right, that was a sound bite. We should tweet that or something. Does Twitter still exist, or do we have to TikTok it now? I'm not sure. Okay, that sounds great. What's if you're a product company that has a product that isn't completely defined and is not going to just take over the world instantly with sales, then what?
Put your teams together, let the workflow dictate where the workers go.
Man, organizing a company based on where the work is instead of what the org chart says. This is radical stuff, Jeff.
It's so radical. Theory of constraints came out in what, the late 80s? Apply the work where the constraint is.
Don't worry. Once it reaches its 50th anniversary, then maybe we'll cross the chasm.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for chatting, Jeff. We'll see you next week.
Yes.
Bye.